All right, so I was given the title here, Common Platform for Maritime Informatics and the Role of the MCC, which obviously is not very far from my core business, so that's very fortunate. Next, please. So, obviously, what we are talking about is the digitalization of the maritime domain. And my first point here is that's what e-navigation used to be. When we started with e-navigation many years ago, this was the digitalization of the maritime domain. This was bringing contemporary digital technologies to use in the maritime domain. But then some time along the road here, there was something introduced in the context of e-navigation. So we have now digitalization in the context of e-navigation, and then we have other digitalization. And maybe in my mimic, you could see that I'm not super thrilled about that. Next slide. So why am I not thrilled about that? Well, in e-navigation, we have been building a lot of what I call building blocks for digitalization, guidelines, processes, standards, and those are building blocks needed for digitalization. And if other digitalization efforts develop other building blocks for the same purposes, then we do not have interoperability, we do not have what Jeppe was talking about, harmonized systems, and that is not where we want to go. So that is somewhat of a concern of mine. Next slide, please. So the building blocks, I can hardly see my own slide now because we're panning around in the, thank you. We have a number of building blocks. Most of them are quite familiar to you, but there are new ones coming along. One we have had for quite a long time is the initial description of maritime services, and there we have in the context of e-navigation. But that describes sort of the groups of digitalization, like digitalization in area of MCS, of the maritime safety information, reporting, and different areas. We then have our guideline for how to make technical services, IALA guideline 1158, which is a way that we can describe technical services that can actually perform the digital exchange. We have our maritime resource names, or a unique way of identifying anything in the maritime domain. We have our S100, the universal hydrographic data model for a way we can do data modeling in the maritime domain. And we have a guideline from IMO. IMO is NSC 467101 that describe how the maritime services and the technical services and the maritime resource name and the data modeling all fits together. And more recently, we got another guideline, G1157 from IALA, which builds upon G1128 and describes how to make a technical service that uses internet technology, web services to exchange S100 data. That builds on the other technical service description. And we have coming up, not released yet, a standard that is called Sejong, which describes a way to securely exchange S100 data to ships. And again, this builds and is aligned with G1128 and G1157. There's a community working on making sure that all these standards and building blocks are aligned with each other. So my point is, let's use the same building blocks and not invent different building blocks for different areas of digitalization in the maritime domain, because we need basically the same type of building blocks for digitalization. Next slide, please. So at this point, it's usually where I go and say, oh, but we missed something more, and I go about talking about the MCP, and I will, but we have actually a new building block, a new guideline, which is called Evaluation of Platforms for the Provision of Maritime Services, which has recently been adopted by IALA, which describes these missing elements, these missing links, these platforms that we also need in order to support digitalization. And the core features here are authentication. When you are moving around the world with the vessels and you need to exchange information with different stakeholders, how do you authenticate the parties that exchange information? Very, very core feature to have. And you need some platform to be able to support that, that feature. Also authorization, service management, and discoverability are some of the core elements described in this, this guideline. And yes, thank you. And of course, the answer to that, from my perspective, is the Maritime Connectivity Platform, which supports these features or fills out these missing links. Next slide, please. So the document talks about platforms in plural. So several platforms, the more the better. Lots of different platforms doing different things. No. What we need again here is either harmonized interoperable platforms that works in the same way with the standardized APIs doing the basic same thing, or a single decentralized platform, which is actually more or less the same. That is what we need. Otherwise, we are defying the purpose of introducing platforms or a platform. Next slide, please. And this is where the role of the MCC comes in, because regardless of what you of whether you need a number of platforms that need to be harmonized, or you need a single decentralized platform, somebody needs to facilitate creating the standards and procedures around these platforms and making sure that they are in place, so you have interoperability between the platforms or between the entities in a decentralized system. And that is the role of the Maritime Connectivity Platform Consortium and what we're doing with the MCP. Next slide, please. So, most of you probably know about the MCP. I will not dive into the details here. You, of course, have the Maritime Identity Registry as the core element there for identities and the mechanism for providing authentication, service registry for service discoverability, and maritime messaging service for secure and reliable information exchange. Next slide. And as I said, the MCP is not one system, or it is a system, but it is a decentralized system, which is very, very important. In the beginning, when the concept was born, it was a single system, but over the course of the development, it was understood that this needs to be a decentralized system. So many different actors can run MCPs or be MCP service providers, and basically, if you want to use MCP, there's one question you need to ask: do I want to use somebody else's MCP, or do I want to set up my own MCP? So both are possible. Next slide. And we have the governing body, the Maritime Platform Consortium, which is set up after the model of the World Wide Web Consortium, which is governing many of the standards that we know from the internet, and using the same structure and the decision model from the World Wide Web Consortium. Next slide. So where are we with the MCP now? When I talk about this in this form last year, we had a big milestone where we said we actually have operational instances at this time. But there was a little abadabai with these MCP instances. That was that we actually hadn't totally finalized the definition of each of the components of MCP at that time. And we still haven't done that for all the components, but we've done that for the identity registry at this point. So now we know exactly what it means to be an MCP identity service provider. So the next step for us now will be to formally endorse the MCP instance providers that exist and make an assessment according to the procedures that we have established in order to assess an MCP service provider. So that will be the next step. And we're still working on exactly defining the service registry and the messaging service. We have still the instance run by Ministry of Ocean Fisheries in Korea. We have the Navalink instance that's set up by SARC, Akmpfer, and Wärtsilä. FinTraffic is setting up an instance which is not too early. Hold it. One back, please. Thank you. We have FinTraffic that has been decided to make one, which is not operational yet, and we have other organizations in the process of setting up MCPs, Cytronics in Russia, TLA in UK, in Canada, China, and marine fields in Cyprus. So there's a good momentum going there. Next slide, please. And in the consortium, we have a number of members, a growing number, not tremendously fastly growing, but steadily growing number of members in the MCP consortium. And I actually wanted to say something earlier that the document on platforms that is actually going to be presented at an IALA webinar on the 30th of September. So anybody that wants to have an insight in this document, there will be a webinar on that date. I don't have the time yet, but I hope I let them make available that information. At least it's on the 30th of September. Right, so next slide, please. And as usual, more information can be found on our website. And actually, if you look at it now and think it's a little bit old school and doesn't look that great, then in a week's time or so, we'll be launching new websites which will look much more contemporary and much more and much better. All right. So those were the words from me. I wanted to say a little bit about a design award I was recently given about for PowerPoint presentations, but I think I'll skip that due to the time. So I will move on to the next presenter. And my next presenter here is Michael Bergman. And Michael has many hats, one of them being the CEO of Bergman Marine. And he will be talking about digital route exchange testbed and single window. So the cyberspace is yours, Michael.